Hello, welcome to our debate about the need for rehabilitation versus the right to exercise personal liberties. My name is Rose. I'm the introducer and researcher for the rehabilitation side. Alyssa is the summarizer and illustrator for the rehabilitation side. Krista is the summarizer and illustrator for the personal liberties side. Phil is the researcher for the personal liberties side, and Amber is the fielder. We'll first start with Krista to summarize the personal liberties side of the debate and also illustrate it.
As stated in the Bannerman article, personal liberties, as defined in legal terms, includes freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and other rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. However, we may argue that personal liberties are even more basic and include freedom of choice for all people and for all behavioral interventions. From a behavior analytic point of view, choices in life are valued and respected. Perceived choice is extremely valued in this field as it plays an important role in an individual's success. All people, including those with disabilities, appreciate making simple choices throughout their day. It is our stance as pro-right to personal liberties that individuals with developmental disabilities have the right to make choices for themselves and that these choices are respected by the service providers. In the Agnoff article, there's a strong movement for disabled individuals to become more independent with everyday living activities, including employment. More treatment facilities are pushing for alternatives to rehabilitation and leading towards post-secondary education options that would promote disabled populations to find employment and live more independently. Individuals should have a right to choose until they no longer have the capacity to make responsible choices or when they have a history of hurting themselves or others. Okay. Findings from experimental research such as in Burke 1976 prove additional support for personal liberties. This study found that when grade school students were allowed to choose between group or individual instruction, they learned and retained information better. The ability of a client to exercise choice may better prepare him or her to live more independently in the community where individuals are expected to make choices or decisions. Individuals frequently prefer situations in which they have a choice, and oftentimes that choice proves to be beneficial and rarely detrimental. Additional studies have also supported these findings. In the graph below, Montney and Perlmutter measured the effects of choice learning on adults and found that choosing either stimulus or response items enhanced and allowed even limited choices was effective in enhancing learning. Therefore, individuals with neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism should have personal freedom to make choices about their preference of reinforcement and participation in specific activities. So as you can see in this graph, it concludes that learning performance increases as children are given an opportunity to choose their own reinforcers.
All right, thank you, Krista. We will now hear from Phil to present all of his research supporting the personal liberties side.
Thank you. Several research studies in the published literature of applied behavior analysis and psychology have indicated beneficial effects in subjects' behavior when presented with freedom of making choices. Many individuals with developmental disabilities receive various support services. In some instances, these services are in-home support, day clinic support, or even residential facility support. For many of these clients, particularly those who present as lower functioning and may have communication deficiencies, their option to freely choose is often non-existent. In such cases, clients may have their reinforcers, snacks, meals, clothing, activities, and more chosen for them by a direct support staff. This is well validated in the classic ethical article written by Bannerman et al. 1990, in which the right to rehabilitation is balanced with the right to exercising personal liberties. Infringement on clients' personal liberties can lead to problematic behavior changes. As a reaction to the client trying to protest engaging in unwanted activities or with unwanted items. Many published research studies have examined freedom of choice among individuals both typically developing and with developmental disabilities. To support the pro-personal liberties side points, I will offer a brief synopsis in the interest of time of only 5 published studies that will prove the behavioral benefits associated with allowing for promoting freedom of choice and liberty among clients with developmental disabilities. In a study by Canfor and Grimm, 1978, researchers conducted an experiment to determine if even the mere perceived notion of free choice could facilitate better rates of reading speed. According to the authors, subjects who perceived that they were given the choice in training procedures improved significantly more in reading speed than subjects who lost the freedom of choice. However, despite the findings of the study supporting the author's hypothesis, the study did have some limitations, such as when the authors mentioned further testing needed to be conducted in order to determine whether or not generalization was warranted from the lab setting to the natural environment. Similarly, in a study by Devine and Fernald in 1973, the effect of choice was examined to see if choice could impact the magnitude of level of fear desensitization. Results of the study indicated that subjects who were able to choose their preferred method of fear reduction therapy from an array of options produced significantly more fear reduction than either the randomly assigned or non-preferred therapy choices. This indicates that the subjects who have some control over their therapy, it may keep them better engaged and perhaps reduce levels of problematic behavior associated with anxiety and fear, as in this case the researchers were testing for fear of snakes. In another study, as briefly summarized by Krista, Burke 1978, to test the effects of choice on the acquisition of sight words, elementary school age children were divided into 2 groups. One group had freedom of choice of whether they wanted individualized or group instruction, while the other control group did not have choice. Results indicated that those students in the group with choice over instructional method significantly improved learning of sight vocabulary words. This study did have the limitation, though, that only one academic area, the learning of sight words, was tested, and the authors did suggest conducting more research across academic subjects. One sees the same positive impact in behavior change when allowing for individual choice making in another study by Kogel et al. 1987. The study examined the effects of child-preferred activity versus adult-chosen activity on the subject's social avoidance behavior. Results indicated a decrease in instances of social avoidance behavior when the child subject had freedom of choice over the activity. This is similar to the indications mentioned in many pieces of behavioral literature in which the clients may engage in more communication during free play or while engaging in a reinforcing activity rather than when in a demand condition. Essentially, if the activity isn't reinforcing for the individual, problematic behavior may inevitably emerge. A last example of individual freedom of choice benefiting the subject or client can be observed in a study by Zuckerman et al. 1978. In this study, yoked pairs of subjects were placed together with the task of putting together a puzzle. One of the subjects in each pair would have the freedom of choice of which puzzle to complete and how much time he or she would allot his or herself to complete that puzzle. The puzzle was then completed, and then the next paired subject would have to complete that same exact puzzle within that same amount of time that wasn't of his or her choosing. Results of this study showed greater success in puzzle completion by the subject in the pair who was free to make the choice. One could arguably go on, citing many more examples from the published research literature of the benefits of allowing for individual freedom of individuals with developmental disabilities. What may seem like a small and relatively insignificant factor may mean the world to an individual with a developmental disability who may have little or no control over his or her life and many decisions throughout the day. Many may argue that individuals with developmental disabilities may lack the ability to make good choices. In many instances, this may be true, but these individuals' autonomy should still be respected to the greatest extent possible, and when possible, the direct service staff should act as guides rather than enforcers and suggest better or healthier options for their clients while still respecting their individual decisions. When the subject or client does make a healthier life choice, such behavior should be reinforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. We will now hear from Alyssa, who is the illustrator and summarizer on the habilitation side.
Okay. Habilitation refers to giving individuals services to help them learn, retain, or improve skills so that they may be more productive members of society. In the past, many families who have children who have autism were unable to use habilitative services because they could not afford them. At that time, they were not covered by insurance. In 1989, Medicaid added habilitative services to the list that would be covered. Different states have different rules regarding habilitative services, but as of 2014, now all states give individuals at least partial coverage. Examples of these services include, but are not limited to, ABA therapy and speech and language pathology. There is a need for habilitation in the United States. Habilitation tries to improve the individual's quality of life, not violate their personal liberties. Many individuals with autism cannot make the choice to be in habilitative services by themselves because they will not understand how this will help them in the future. Parents or guardians usually make these important decisions for them because they want to see them have a better quality of life. They want to see them be able to function in society when they are no longer around to help them. Some would say that people with autism often make poor choices because it is difficult for them to make decisions about complex situations. It is easier for them to make a decision such as picking out what activity they're going to do for the day, or deciding what they want to eat, or even picking out their outfit for the day. However, these are simple decisions and not complex. A complex decision would be something like getting a job. They may not understand why they may need a job or how it could benefit them. These may be the types of decisions that parents and guardians must make for them. They are not making these decisions as an attempt to control their life, but instead making these decisions because it is clear how these services will help them. The example I gave about individuals finding a job can help them better their future. Supportive employment has become a very popular habilitative service. These individuals are assisted in obtaining employment by learning new skills, such as how to dress when they come to work, how to conduct themselves in an interview, and teach them the responsibilities of their job position. Through habilitation, you are able to find the person's strengths and areas in which they excel in. It is meant to be a learning tool so they can retain these skills throughout their lifetime. Making decisions can be difficult for anyone, let alone if they have impairments in their brain. Most individuals who have autism need help making decisions. There are also many who have a low IQ and are unable to make decisions for themselves. Most people with autism have an IQ below 70. If their IQ is this low, they may be unable to realize the effects their decisions have, or why they are making the decision in the first place, or how the decision can benefit them. They may not understand because making decisions can be complex. Individuals who have autism have impairments in their working memory, and a person's working memory plays a big role in decision making. It is responsible for holding information, processing that information, and manipulating the information. Someone who has impairments in their working memory may not be able to process the information correctly and be able to make a good choice about certain situations. Working memory impairments can also cause difficulties in learning, which is why habilitative services are so important. They focus on what needs to be learned and devise good strategies to help the individual achieve success. If a person who has autism chooses that they do not want to be in habilitative services, it may be because they do not fully understand how it will benefit them later in life. There is a need for habilitation. The goal of habilitation is not to take away the person's rights, but to give them a better quality of life. If an individual who has autism wants to make the choice to not be involved in habilitative services, they could be damaging their future. By not engaging in these services, they are hindering their ability to be independent in the future. If they do not want to learn certain skills, they will not be able to function on their own. For example, if they do not learn how to do simple independent tasks such as cook, clean, or do laundry, how will they ever be able to live or function on their own? This is the reason that many parents or guardians make these decisions for them, because they see how knowing these skills will benefit them in the future. Habilitation is there to help the individual and allow them to grow to their full potential. Okay, so now Rose is going to pull up my chart. Okay, this is a chart regarding working memory. Research has shown that working memory does affect the decisions we make. If there are working memory impairments, a person may be unable to determine the benefits or consequences of the choices they make. Working memory starts by holding information for a few seconds. It can only hold 5 to 7 items at a time. This means that if a person has autism, it may be difficult for them to retain the information if there are several choices. Individuals who have autism have impairments, which means they might not be able to retain 5 to 7 items at one time. They may be only able to retain 2 items at one time, depending on their level of functioning. Having impairments in this area causes the working memory to have an even smaller capacity than it already does. It also holds and manipulates information. Because of the impairments in people with autism, they may have a difficult time manipulating the information to see how the decision they are making will affect them. They can make decisions without actually knowing why they are making that choice. Working memory also depends on how much mental effort you are giving to something. If a person who has
Okay, so I guess Amber got out of the call. Or I'm sorry. Alyssa, did you finish your part?
Yeah, but my thing disconnected, so I couldn't tell if you guys knew that I finished.
Yeah, it disconnected.
Oh, yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. That's all. All right. I'm just going to keep going if that's all right with you. Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. All right. I will now be discussing the research supporting the habilitation side. Because of a lack in the client's right to habilitation and opportunity to learn independent living skills, there are laws mandating that those with disabilities must be cared for in a supportive way that encourages independent living skills. The Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act provides financial help in order to help organizations that provide community services to those with disabilities. Other laws that have mandated habilitation include the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, and quite a few more. These laws require that professionals provide a safe environment for these individuals that will put an emphasis on independent living skills. According to Bannerman et al., those with disabilities make poor choices, which is why habilitation is important for individuals with disabilities. Many individuals with disabilities do not have the certain skills in their repertoire which can lead them to engage in problem behaviors. For an example, an adult with autism may not have leisure skills, and instead of doing something appropriate, they may engage in stereotypic behavior. Other skills that individuals have may not be completely mastered, which can lead to the not getting dressed all the way or properly, or not knowing how to get to work. Because these individuals do not have important skills in their repertoire, it is in their best interest that we as professionals and caregivers aid them in decision making to ensure that they are safe and getting the most out of life. Some activities should not be given a choice, such as brushing teeth, eating meals, and bathing. Giving a client the right to choose can harm them in the sense that they may be unable to learn new skills. This gives the clients the right to choose to have their caregivers do things for them. For example, if a client is given the choice to have a caregiver brush their own teeth, they will never learn how to. If a client chooses not to learn skills that promote independent living, they will not be living life independently. Clients may choose to learn skills, may not choose to learn skills needed in order to work. Those with autism have deficits in spatial working memory. These deficits include problems with identifying the spatial locations of people and objects. Deficits in this area can make communication and social experiences more difficult. Jang, Capistrano, and Palm researched deficits in spatial working memory in high-functioning children with autism. This study had a group of typically developing children and high-functioning children with autism participating in spatial working memory tasks and an attentive tracking task. Results showed that the children with autism had more deficits in the spatial working memory task than the attentive tracking task. The researchers concluded that children with autism have deficits in processing visual information with working memory. In a study by Granger and Lin, the researchers found that those with autism have deficits in working memory that store visual information. These deficits can make decision-making more difficult for those with autism. Those with intellectual disabilities or mental illness may not be able to give consent. This leaves their loved ones in charge of making decisions for them. Chabani and Warner performed a study which included 33 participants who participated in a focus group that looked at the perceptions of guardianship of the parents and the person with the disability. The results of this study included that all those with disabilities, except for one participant, felt that they needed a guardian. Those with intellectual disabilities expressed a few areas in which they valued their independence, and those with mental illness expressed their need for independence throughout their everyday life, but mentioned when things became too overwhelming, they needed a guardian to take control of decision-making. Primary areas in which a few participants were afraid of having independence included banking and employment. Participants with intellectual disability and mental illness expressed anger about not being in charge of their finances and were confident that they could manage their own finances with help, which is why habilitation is important. Habilitation will provide these individuals with the skills and support needed for financial success without risking the failures and troubles that can come with these individuals making choices for things they do not fully understand. Thank you. We will now go to Amber for frequently asked questions on this topic.
Thanks. So we have a couple of questions. Some of them are a little bit of rebuttal, but our first one is going to be answered by Phil. So Phil, how might BCBAs balance the right to habilitation while also balancing the right to choose?
That's a great question. It's always important for BCBAs to integrate choices into programs, so there can always be choices given to the client, no matter how small that choice may seem. So even if you're asking the client something like, what color paper do you want to work with, or do you want to drink out of a car cup or a princess-themed cup, simple and small choices such as those give the client some control over their environment and their life. And even though that might not seem like a huge impact, it could have more value for that client than you might think. So this is a great way to begin integrating and teaching our clients how to choose by starting with small choices, and then ultimately the right to habilitation and the right to choose should not be seen as conflicting goals, but rather how to best balance these two issues for the greater good of the client over time.
Awesome answer. Our next question goes to Krista. So there are sometimes issues of safety and liability. We can't always allow people to do whatever they want. So how can we give our clients the freedom that they want and that they need while also ensuring that they have safety?
Sure. Well, we always need to ensure safety. That's our #1 priority, and allow for maximum freedom. So this is achieved by fading out our procedures. So as I said, it's important to keep safety and liability the main concern. You may need permission from parents or guardians to begin to fade out some of these procedures. For example, like if a person is riding the bus and they want to start riding the bus independently, we can start by first sitting very close to them, making sure they understand how the rules and concepts of riding a bus works, and then we fade out by sitting towards the back of the bus, and eventually that individual will be able to ride on the bus independently. So we need to teach these freedom skills before we just throw them out into the real world. And we need to show them how to make appropriate choices and teach them without, and then eventually fading back our support.
Good. So along those lines, Krista, what would the differences be in giving choices for children versus adults? So for example, we have kids all the time, they turned 18 and they are technically adults. So what would be the difference in dealing with those types of situations rather than with children?
So when they reach adulthood, we need to respect their choices as we would a neurotypical adult. For example, with relationships with significant others, if our students decide to engage in those types of relationships, we can guide them and support them, but we can't make those choices for them. We can't tell them exactly what they can and cannot do.
Awesome. I'm going to answer this one for the pro side. Would our stance change for pro rights if the client's behaviors were self-injurious or dangerous to others in the environment? We kind of decided that it might change a little bit, but we don't really think that their freedoms should be limited just because they have aggressive behavior or SIB behavior, that we might have to move some of our freedoms to be a little bit less until we've worked on some of these behaviors, some of the SIB and aggressive behavior. We might have to habilitate a little bit before we're able to give more freedom, but we still want to offer the ability for the client to choose and have choices. Just like we talked about with Phil's question, sometimes even just small choices like what color paper do you want to use, you can always give the client choices, and we can always have choice available no matter what type of behaviors the client is producing, and this would teach them how to make choices, and we can again fade them to allow them to make choices more independently. We can also argue people with disabilities make poor choices just like people who are neurotypical make poor choices in life. So are we removing the ability for people with disabilities to learn from their mistakes the way that typically developing people learn? And Alyssa is going to answer this question for us.
Again, this is where the balance of allowing them to make their own choices versus habilitation really comes into play. Of course, we want them to learn and develop the same way that neurotypicals learn. I think when the poor choice is going to negatively affect their health, safety, or be detrimental to their well-being, we should step in and guide them away from that choice. But if the poor choice is not going to be detrimental in any way and it's going to serve as a learning opportunity for them, it is sometimes good to allow them to make the choices that will push them towards independence and making choices in the future. If we are always making choices for them and we never allow them to learn from poor choices, they will never be independent in their choices and will need habilitation forever, which is not working towards the ultimate goal of independence.
Cool. Yeah, and as we all know as BCBAs, our goal for our clients is to build them to the most independent state that they can be in. So that's an awesome answer. Our last question, how might we address making choices when the choices are limited due to finances, resources, etc.? The best way that I think we can answer this is that, again, you can always offer options. I think that it's important that if you have limited resources that you don't offer open-ended questions. So you're not just saying, like, what do you want? You need to give the choices that are available. You wouldn't want to offer up things that aren't available, things that are outside of financial restrictions, and that's okay. We just need to make sure that we are only offering what is available to us. And also, there's nothing wrong with being creative. Creativity goes a long way. You don't always need money, you don't always need resources to provide different choices, and offering small choices is still offering a choice. So these are all of our questions that we came up with. And I think that they answered a lot of our questions for prohabilitation as well as pro-right. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I think we can all agree that a balance of personal liberties and habilitation is the best way for our clients to live a quality life. Thank you for watching our debate.